Ghost of Yotei, one of the biggest games of 2025, is now available, and it is a big game with a lot of narrative themes and storylines and interesting characters that are definitely worth unpacking. So to do that, we caught up with a couple of people from Sucker Punch to break down everything and tell us exactly how they put together the story of Ghost of Yotei. Welcome everyone, my name is Hussain and I am joined by Jason and Ian from Sucker Punch. Hello lads, how you doing?
Hello. Thanks for having us, man.
Yeah, great.
Thank you for coming on. I completed Ghost of Yotei last night actually, finished it up. And we're going to talk about some of the ins and outs of it, which is very exciting. So first things first, the thing that I want to know most about is, where did you start with Atsu as a character? Because obviously by the time you get to the end of the game, she's very different than the character you start with. And the thing that I want to know is, like, what came first? The revenge story, the character, the kind of themes around family? How did you kind of come to, after Jin, this character?
Yeah, so once we decided that we were going to create sort of a whole new chapter in the Ghost story and tell a new character and a new legend and bring you to a new location and a new place, we wanted it to be substantially different in terms of the style of story that we were going to tell too. Although it has a lot of similarities, right? Like, they're both kind of underdogs in their own right, which, you know, that's cool. We want to carry that. It's fun to play as an underdog. You know, people underestimating you is a fun position to be in. But I think pretty quickly we really narrowed in on vengeance or revenge tale. And we like it because it's, you know, classic vengeance stories is an easy hook to get people into. If you pull it off and do a good job with the intro and all that kind of stuff, it's a very easy way to get people invested in whatever your character's journey might be. Now, Ian spent a lot of time taking it past that, because that's where the interesting story and the emotional complexity comes into play, right? We're just trying to get you hooked. But then for the next 10, 15, 20, 25, 30 hours, however long it takes you to play through the story, it's about where you go from there. So started with vengeance, started with revenge. And then I think Ian and his team really led the way to find out what it's going to blossom into beyond that.
Exactly. Once we knew that we were starting from a place of revenge, we were asking ourselves, what did Atsu go through? What was the kind of the seed of the revenge that broke her? And then how was she broken? And how did she react to that? Because this happened to her as a child. She spent 16 years getting stronger, but also putting her guards up and pushing people away. So this starts to inform how we created her story. But we also wanted to find that heart and that vulnerability that she always carries with her, and find ways for that to come out, not just in the main story, but also in the open world as she's encountering people, other people who have been victimized by the Yotei 6, who have kind of taken over this land. And as we continued to craft her story, we looked at that. We saw the people she was connecting with, and essentially how she was building this family, this wolf pack. And so that takes her on this journey of healing, essentially. So starting from that place of revenge, and then looking, how are we going to heal Atsu? What is she going to learn along the way? How is she going to learn from other people and kind of step outside of her skin? And so the family element came in along the way as we started to flesh that out and create these new characters she could connect with and help her heal.
Yeah, I was going to ask that next, actually. How do you walk the line where you want to make sure that this character is someone that the players can get behind and feel empathy for, but their main form of interaction with a lot of other characters in the game that aren't like named characters is violence, a lot of violence. So how do you kind of ensure, what techniques do you use or whatever it may be, to ensure that players don't lose that thread that, you know, she is doing this for this reason and isn't like succumbing to just being another violent kind of character that is in this world?
Yeah, I think we're constantly trying to strike that balance and find the right line to walk. Essentially, we looked at the time in history and the fact that violence was such a way of life for so many people, especially Japan had just ended by 1603, when the game starts, this warring states period. And so there were so many warriors, Atsu included, who had no more wars to fight. So she carries that violence with her into our story, along with the fact that she was kind of born out of violence and this massacre that happened to her family. But we also wanted to not have her not just speak in that mode, and to find new ways to connect with people. And so we were constantly looking for characters who could challenge that. And as her journey goes on as well, finding more ways to challenge that. People who she might have murdered at the start of the game on site, all of a sudden we want to see how far can we push her, how can we see her drop her guard and not react in violence and think about this some. But it was a constant journey as we were fleshing out her story.
And one of the things I really loved was kind of the relationship with Jubei. The fact that he showed up again was a massive surprise. Obviously, you just kind of take for granted that she's the sole survivor of this. So when he reappears and they have that moment where he realizes who she is and then she slowly realizes who he is, that kind of having him to be a kind of mirror to her was really, really interesting. How did you come up with that idea? Or when did you decide that was something necessary?
I think and Ian, you might have to correct me if I'm wrong here, but I think Jubei in particular being alive, I think was all the way in the very, very early I mean, the story morphs a lot in the first 6 months of working on a story, but I believe Jubei existed even back then. And we were always really excited about this sibling-like relationship and seeing it unfold. And they were very different. Even back then, the very first draft, they were very different. Like one had found themselves in the world of samurai ranks and one that's lived as this violent mercenary outcast, certainly an underdog in their own way in society, and how they might collide philosophically. Like I think even the very first drafts of the story, really high level conversations had that. But I too also really love where Ian and this team sort of ended up taking things to, when they meet and they have that moment with each other, it gives the rest of that entire experience with the Oni and that entire valley, so to speak. You get to see their relationship unfold and how they are different. And like, that's one of the goals we always had. And so that's why we didn't want to hold Jubei to be sort of revealed at the very end. We wanted to try to get it to be something that you could discover quite early, actually, because we think it's a wonderful relationship played both by Erica. Ishii does a great job, but so does Noshiro. Noshiro does an amazing role as Jubei. He's an amazing Jubei.
I think one of the really interesting or cool parts of that is I think Jubei as a character, he really pushes the player to, I think he's the first instance of when he reappears and starts looking at Atsu in a certain way to be like, who are you? It also forces the player to kind of step back and really start thinking of her as more than just a, sentient sword running around killing things. Because then you start having a little more awareness of what you're doing, knowing that there's someone out there who is going to reflect on that and there could be consequences going forward. So I think that was a really, really cool way to do it. So great job on that. The other main inflection point for me, I think, was the introduction of Kiku, her niece, I guess. And that was another major moment where I thought, oh, wow, I did not expect that. And it's kind of another character that humanizes her and forces her to change. Was she always there from the outset? And what was her purpose beyond? Did she have a purpose beyond that? Or is it like we need someone to kind of really push her into change?
Kiku came after Jubei, but still relatively early. She came about from first off thinking just about Jubei would have lived a life and would have likely had a child along the way. It ends up he probably had this child much, much younger than he would have wanted to. So we were looking first at Jubei and what his life could have looked like, and then how a catalyst like Kiku could come into and just kind of blow up Atsu's expectations around who her brother is, the truths and the lies they hold from each other even after reuniting. And then Kiku, we really wanted to lean into, like you were mentioning, like pushing her into this new place of change, a new era of responsibility. There's someone looking up to her and might be modeling herself after Atsu and her legend as the ghost. And also in a way mirroring, just the same way Jubei is a mirror to Atsu in some ways, Kiku is a mirror of Atsu in that she's this younger reflection of what Atsu might have been if she hadn't gone through some of that trauma she did as a child. So because of that, we also wanted to have Atsu look at her and wonder, how can I protect this young child that I'm just meeting for the first time, but also in effect myself, and constantly looking for characters that can encourage Atsu to reconnect with her past and herself from her past, to essentially heal herself and look for ways to kind of grow beyond that frozen in time moment of that massacre against her family.
I think also, though, one of the things that really stuck with me was how Kiku kind of forces both Jubei and Atsu and the player to really think about the wider context of the world itself, because they both approach the normality of death and being killed and killing in two very different ways, right? Like Atsu it's very ordinary for her, and she thinks that it's like a fact of life, whereas Jubei is trying to protect his daughter from it. And then through this kid, they both have to kind of reckon with the realities of both their perspective and what's going on around them. So the idea of like telling these small stories within this larger world where you're also telling the stories, how do you scope that out, and how do you make sure that there's always kind of like a connective bridge? Because, you know, the war is happening, but you need that to be kind of like manifest in the smaller stories and the characters, right?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, we even had a lot of discussions around, as that war is happening, how much is Atsu and her wolf pack brought into the war room, essentially, with the samurai. And there's a lot of interesting things going on in there, but we chose to keep it with the smaller group and to really dig into those character relationships and use that larger conflict to pull them in really strong ways against each other, and to have them butt heads, and to have Atsu have to reckon with who she's becoming, whether she meant to or not, and the consequences of her actions as the Onryo, as this legendary figure, and yeah, how Kiku sees that, how Oyuki sees that, and helps guide her through that. But essentially, yeah, we wanted to have that kind of grand, almost Shakespearean backdrop that Atsu is kind of pulled through and becomes a part of, even if she didn't set out in any way to do that. But we never wanted to lose sight of that personal story amid the larger scale conflict.
Right. I guess that's kind of like a somewhat related question. How do you like prepare for moments like that where Atsu is kind of like relinquishing some of her personality, who she used to be? And do you think about it from the player perspective at all? Because obviously the traditional thinking is like, people who are playing games like this, they want that power fantasy, and kind of taking it down a notch by having this character be like, maybe I don't want to be this kind of person, is kind of not a risk, but like you kind of stand to potentially upset the dynamic between the player and the game, right? How much of that do you think about, and how do you like kind of reconcile or justify the need to do that?
It's a great question. And it is interesting for this one because it's a little bit of the inverse of, say, Jin Sakai's journey, which was almost like a darkening as it goes, like doing what's right against people around him that expect otherwise. It gets a bit more violent, but that's also a different story, right? Like that's about an invading force, and this one has some of those elements. There is this like rising army, whatever, but it's not, the reason she's fighting him is not because of a rising army. That would be the altruistic thing to do. She's doing it because of, you know, revenge. She's doing it because she's stopping nothing to stop these people. It's a great question. It's why the intro is so important. It's why the opening, and, you know, even little things like having the ability to kind of bop back and forth at your homestead. You know, even though it's just a really cool, flashy thing, but it's also any trick we can give you to make you feel the sense of loss or make you feel the warmth of the past. Because, you know, even though that scene with Jubei is really wonderful because you like, it humanizes her. Certainly, I agree. But you don't have a ton of those scenes, especially early. So anything you can do to get you into the shoes of Atsu early, that helps put the player in the same position that she is, which is like, I'm going to go find these people. Like, Jesus, man, like what happened to her? So that's like part one. But it is certainly hard as you get to the end, and we're sort of trying to send a message of healing. It really puts a lot of, I think, a lot of narrative pressure on the characters that we built, you know, the people around him, justifying why is Jubei going crazy running home, and then you find out it's because he's got a daughter. Like it helps you start to understand why she might actually have a different life that she could choose, and that is our goal. But it's a great question, especially it's like an action game. It's a really delicate line to balance. You're gonna be fighting people all the way up till the end.
Yeah, I think it's kind of like one of those things where when I started to see her realize that she needs to change, my first thought is like, how is this going to affect me mechanically? Like, am I going to lose the ability to like threaten people with my Onryo kind of like presence or anything like that? So it's just a kind of connection that I made. But one of the other things that I think was really cool about this game, and it's something that you guys did with Tsushima as well, which is like playing in the gray area. I think you do it way more in this game with both protagonists and antagonists in a lot of ways. I think obviously Atsu, it makes sense. She's she's killing a lot, and then she's like between those two worlds. But the Kitsune kind of reveal was really, really cool, really, really interesting. And it's not something I entirely expected, but it was one of those things that I could feel something was up there. What was the thinking behind that character? And again, why do you think it was necessary? And when did that idea come into fruition?
Where we started with the Kitsune in particular, and with Oyuki, was we wanted to create one of the members of the Yotei Six who Atsu was going to spend some time with, without knowing it, to give her time to actually look outside of her own perspective, to see things from Oyuki's eyes, and to realize that, oh, this person also is complicit in the night that Atsu lost her family, but also is another victim of Saito in a way. So we really wanted to explore how much we could push Atsu into this place to really kind of recontextualize and rethink about what she's been through, and that moment in time where she did lose her family as a child, and then to connect with Oyuki, and to even while honoring essentially players' anger and Atsu's anger and feeling of betrayal because Oyuki lied to them and was there the night of the massacre. We ultimately wanted to really test Atsu and see how far we could push her to let her grow and see, will she actually show mercy here. And even then, as she's showing an act of forgiveness, not fully forgiven, she's still on this journey of coming to terms with it and accepting Oyuki for who she is. But really, it's just something we wanted to put Atsu in a really challenging position and see how we could use Oyuki and the Kitsune to challenge her perceptions around what it means to cross a name off of her list.
Was there any intention to kind of, the way I read it, was there any intention to have Oyuki be kind of a maternal figure for Atsu? Because, she lost her mum, and, when kids are, going off the rails, it's usually their parents that come in and be like, you can pull yourself out of this. But Atsu hasn't had someone like that her entire life, right? So she now has this figure who she sees and has to admit has changed. And obviously she's on a journey of change. And then she meets Kiku, who has that similar anger to her. So was there a kind of like thing where you're like, she needs to realize she can change so that she can show Kiku she can change at one point? Was that an intention there?
Yeah, absolutely. And I'm glad you picked up on that, because she's definitely connecting with literal members of her family, but also these representations of it. And Oyuki is absolutely there, especially with the music connection as well. Played shamisen just like Atsu's mother did, and was there when her mother died. So we really wanted to draw on those parallels and play with that to absolutely inspire Atsu to think about, oh, maybe I can change, and also see herself through the eyes of her mother in this current timeline, and to project that onto to Kiku as well, to start to color how she's perceiving herself versus just putting the blinders on and essentially saying, I don't have a right to exist beyond revenge. We wanted to just open that up, and these characters were a window into doing that.
And going back to that gray area, kind of, you also, like, even with like the Oni, for example, when you kind of have that confrontation, there is that one moment where he shows a bit of vulnerability, where he's like, I shouldn't be here. Like, I should be on the battlefield. That is who I am. And in that moment, it's like, oh, this guy's got something else fueling him or like pulling him down, and it could be why he's the way he is. What was kind of like the intent behind that moment, and what was he actually trying to say there?
Yeah, we are always looking for ways to dimensionalize these characters, especially a character like the Oni, who is just even the present day, behind the mask, behind the armor. Who is that man back there? And one thing we wanted to hit on there was the fact that he has been living under Saito for so long, and also he used to be a great warrior, and he was a hero in the past, and just like so many of the Yotei Six, they lost that. They were disgraced. They came north. They're trying to reclaim that, but ultimately he's just a steward for Saito, who is rebuilding this castle for his lord, which is a part of that life. But I think also there's that burning resentment and pride in there, where he wants to be more, and to be confronted by someone like Atsu, who is definitely below him, and scarred by her in the past, and then ultimately brought to his knees by her. It's a humbling experience.
Yeah, it's a kind of like that reminder of like he's still vulnerable even if he is, who he thinks he is. The other character that I did not expect a redemption for was a spider, which was a interesting kind of turn for that character. But it's a redemption that is, he doesn't come out good. He just kind of does one thing and it comes from a place of spite almost. But it's still valuable in certain ways. But the way that other people reacted around the spider, like Atsu was surprisingly forgiving towards him, and Jubei was similar as well. What was kind of like the approach there? Because the spider is obviously someone. It's also going back to the idea of the changing the dynamic between the player and the story. Like I felt for a little moment I was robbed of the opportunity to kill this guy because he's being such an annoying little pest the entire time. So you're almost building up to be able to like take him out, and then it's just that's kind of snatched away from you. What was the kind of like approach there, and how did that go down? And was there any kind of thinking or arguments happening around that part of it?
Yeah, we could probably talk about Spider for a while. I know we had a lot of different feelings because he's even very early on was well written in a way that made you just like I just really don't like that guy, and so his purpose and how he dies or how he is left alive and like whatever outcomes we could have for him, even whether it's redemption or you feel sorry for him or whatever, became a topic of pretty heated discussion because he's an opportunity, really and truly. All we really care about at this point, obviously, it's great to have a spider have some kind of resolution that feels satisfying, but it's way more important. Is it showcasing her journey? Like, is it helping you understand her step towards healing at all? And by then, we're well on that way. And so, I think it's I think with the choice that the writing team made here is actually quite good. That it's not just like kill him.
Yeah.
Because I think it would be putting her a step maybe backwards, even though part of me is just like you want to because it's just so. I mean, you kill. It's an action game. You spend a lot of time killing people for far less direct, impact on your life.
Yeah.
But it is a process of healing. So I think it was an interesting step that the writing team made to humanize Atsu in a lot of ways in her journey.
Yeah. What was the kind of the message, or what did you want the player to feel in terms of how that relationship was constructed between the spider, his brother, and their dad? Because I feel like when as someone watching it and someone who's embodying Atsu, it kind of also is a lesson about family, right? Like this spider, he clearly isn't the favored son. Like he knows his dad doesn't really care about him, but he sticks around and he's still there, and it's purely because of his brother, right? So you have this kind of like clearly evil dude with a son, two sons who are clearly evil, but they have this love between each other, the two brothers, and it's really like confusing and disarming at times because it's like, oh, evil people can also love in a similar way as Atsu feels for her family and the vengeance she's on. Like, are they just two sides of the same coin?
To a degree, absolutely. And we were constantly looking. You brought up mirrors a while ago, and every opportunity we could find a way to mirror what Atsu's going through in the other characters. And so much of Lord Saito is a mirror to the path Atsu could walk. And even though he does have his sons and he has the Yotei six around him, they all hate him or resent him or are trying to take him down a notch if they can, except for one of his sons who is still broken but ostensibly in control, and then the spider who is absolutely just completely broken. And I found him quite sad beneath the veneer of nastiness that he tries to project as his expression of strength. And even looking at like personally inspired by Succession, the TV show, of the family dynamics there, which I find fascinating always. It's just how can we show how different people hurt each other and connect with them, even if personally I don't think Atsu forgives the spider. But we leave it open to interpretation because it is so complex, and we didn't want to shy away from that aspect of the story or Atsu's journey.
Yeah. There's also that kind of like parity between, the question, who are you without your family? And in terms of Atsu's case, she figured out that she was essentially a Ronin and and her whole path was violence and revenge. And now he is now forced to find out who he is without his family. And it's kind of sad the way he doesn't really know. And he's like, I guess I'll go to the mainland and figure it out. And it's just seeing him kind of brought down that low from being this annoying pest who's like shooting at you constantly and being a menace. That was really, really unexpected. The other thing I wanted to talk about is that same gray area again coming to Lord Saito, because he is very much a one kind of like style of villain. Like you show him as being evil the entire time. And then right at the end, as you're kind of like reaching the point where you're going to clash, you suddenly learn that his daughter died and your family had a part to play in that. That kind of same approach, similar question to it. What was the thinking there, and why, again, did you feel it was necessary, and how did you feel that would go down, and why did you think it was important?
Bringing that out, we really wanted to explain that he had also been through incredible loss, and that there was something really fueling him, and that he lost a huge amount when he was this Grand Lord in the South, in mainland Japan, and then losing that, and then the trek north, and then losing his daughter, his infant daughter, in the midst of that, was just one of many, I think, gutting losses that we really wanted to express and show, like what are the wounds that he's carried with him that have made him fully shut other people out, and bring out some of those dimensions alongside his vision for Ezo, which is more. I do think Atsu would agree with some of what he wants to do with the land and the kind of the free of the shogun's rules, and in a place where people like Atsu could make a living. But ultimately, the way he goes about it, the degree to which he is willing to go, and also, of course, what he's done in the past, is something that she can't get over, and that many people can't. But it was important for us to show the different the wounds he carried as well, just like Atsu.
That was something I definitely thought about, because every time he appears and you learn about what his goal is, or what his kind of the way he behaves around his subordinates, because everyone around him seems pretty chill. Like everyone, he just walks around and he's always chatting to people, and you overhear his conversations with other members, like when you're climbing outside and he's like, I'm just a dad, trying to figure stuff out and that kind of thing. So it was, I was very cognizant of the fact that it's the situation where like it's like the worst person is saying some good things, and how that impacts her as well. So when that moment happened, it was really surprising to me. Was there ever a situation where you thought about finishing the game by letting him live?
Yeah, there definitely was, at least among the writing team. We talked about it, especially because Atsu's journey is so much about revenge and healing, and so it can build to a natural place where maybe Atsu would let him go. But ultimately, we were looking at both characters, both Atsu's journey and Saito's, and knowing Saito and what he's been through and how fixated he is on revenge and how he's trapped in that world, the way Atsu could be as well if she gave into it, we knew he would not stop, no matter what. So then we looked at how can we honor Atsu's story and what she's going through without having her walk away, because at the end of the day, Saito's just going to keep coming at her. And ultimately it was about, why is she fighting him? And it is not, it is not for the past and for her own pain as much as it is for her new family and for the future she hopes to have. So, we considered all angles, but that's where we landed to be true to Atsu's journey.
And how much of that was also kind of like informed by the need to have a gameplay resolution as well? Because when that kind of confrontation was happening, I was like, oh, she's going to let him go. And I'm kind of okay with it, because it's how her natural arc would be going, right? After the spider, she's learned a lot of lessons, and now she's at this final moment where she has something to live for, they're safe, and there's a very real possibility she'll just walk away from this. But then he kills Jubei. And in my mind, I was like, oh, they needed to kill him so that I would be pissed again and I would want to kill him again. How much of that is true? Or was it just like, no, Jubei's got to go?
I feel like there were so many different variations that we looked at, that there one of the possibilities of the way we thought might be that one, because I do know that you spend a lot of time making a game, you spend a lot of time making a story, and you look at the story over here, and then you put it in, and you experience it, after hours and hours of gameplay, and then you do get to the end, and there is gameplay expectations, as you say. Like, I want a really fulfilling boss battle. I want a fulfilling sort of final finale. Sort of this is the height of the combat narrative experience. And we tried various ways, thinking about how the best way to end the game for Atsu. Like, and in the end, we felt like, if we found the right version of the story that could give us an exciting combat experience that ends his story, because I do think ultimately we started feeling like if we were to let him go or he walked away, which, yes, there were some versions of that we wrote down and thought about, as Ian mentioned, that it kind of almost leaves her story up in the air and possibly not ended, or it kind of leaves it like, oh, she's maybe comes back, or like. And honestly, what was most interesting to us is that it felt gratifying as a player, it felt gratifying for Atsu, and it felt that his death was due to his sort of own actions.
Yeah.
Like, it's inevitable because of the things that he did. Like, this guy cannot come out of it, or else he would have already. I mean, and also, I mean, it's just gonna be worse. He just lost his own 2 sons. Like, it's hard to imagine, after seeing all of them, it's hard to imagine it not being this way for us. Certainly when he kills Jubei, it sends her into a very passion reason why she needs to now take his life. And so you're always looking for that a story that can have a good narrative conclusion, but also really good gameplay conclusion as well.
I have a kind of like broader question pertaining to like discussions around the way stories are told. And right now there's like a big discussion around revenge stories and them being a very familiar, perhaps even overused type of narrative framework. Because obviously a lot of people do it. It's something that PlayStation Studios do a lot as well, with Last of Us and etc., God of War, that kind of stuff. What is it about this kind of format, or like this kind of thread, this narrative framework, that makes it so fertile for everyone to kind of approach? And what makes it a story type that you keep wanting to come back to?
It's a great question. And Ian might have some specifics, especially pertaining to, story. But, I mean, I feel like there are a lot of different types of games that, and even within Sony, that don't touch revenge at all. But you're right, there are some that are around revenge. And I can't really speak to why they do it, but I will say some of the reasons why we chose it. And I think some of those will have overlap, and I bet some of them won't have any at all. So, for example, the one it's hard to imagine that any other Sony game has been looking at a bunch of samurai films with revenge and decided that it was they were inspired by something like that. But I could imagine that the second reason, which is we wanted a game, especially we were going for a game that was going to be very open, a lot of freedom. You can kind of, I've seen people like, I played 40, 50 hours and I haven't gotten the second, Yotei 6 member. Like, that is by design. Like, we've made the game to be this way. But that really meant that we needed a very simple hook. We needed a very simple narrative hook that could propel you into Atsu's journey. And some people are just going to go straight and do it and find out it's a lot more than that. It's about healing over the course of revenge. Revenge just sets it off, right? And the people that don't, like, at least you understand. At least it's not like a hyper complex thing to understand early on. And I do imagine that it's probably can be appealing as storytellers, because storytelling is hard enough as it is. But you put it inside of a big giant video game, full of progression and open world and exploration and all these other competing elements, it can be really, really challenging. So the simplicity of it is really beautiful. And I think there's probably something that's very attractive to creators.
How about you as a writer, Ian?
It's similar in that as we're approaching the story and we know it's going to be so wide that we want the player to be able to keep that and track that in their head, and not lose sight of that kind of overriding objective and emotional core to what Atsu's going through, even as she's following the golden bird to do any number of side stories. But also it's the relatability of being able to, we also wanted a smaller opening overall, so that players could engage in the gameplay and get to the open world early. And part of that means also that we wanted players to lock into and relate to that core overriding goal. and it is just such a visceral, like human desire that does have that deep roots in Japanese history, but just everywhere. Everyone can relate to it just to varying degrees, and so we wanted to kind of plant that fire in the player and create that connection with Atsu that they could carry it out into the open world, even if they decided not to engage in the revenge quest for 30 hours, because ultimately going off and doing other things is a form of healing and not giving into that obsession. So, but the relatability was a key part of it for us as well.
What is the mood like in the studio when you spend as many years as you do, if you also count Tsushima in it, kind of playing, writing, making games in this very kind of dark kind of part of human emotion and humanity? What is that like? Do you feel that kind of seeping into yourselves? Do you have to do things to be like, I'm going to go watch Teletubbies for an hour to make sure that I can come out of this a normal human being?
Well, I mean, it's a great question, Tam. I do feel like our studio and honestly, the game, both Ghost of Tsushima and Ghost of Yotei has a really healthy balance of celebrating beauty and nature and quiet moments and just like, I don't know, it's sometimes serene, it's sort of quite the opposite of this sort of like suicidal vengeance quest. There's tragedy, there's moments where you feel really touched, and there's moments where you feel really angry for, and that's all due to the writing team and anyone who has to touch narrative design and getting it inside the game. But I think that's kind of why Ghost is not a dark IP, like in general. Like I would say it's right in the middle, or maybe even like more lighthearted, because that's why the world's so vibrant. The world's so sort of romantic, poetic beauty just splayed out all over the place for people to enjoy. And it's to balance things out, like that is a very real by design. Even when we finished Tsushima, we were like, okay, like what are the pillars of another Ghost game? Before we knew what we were making, we're like, one of them was like tone balanced between like, you're going to be killing, so vengeance, or going against your honor and becoming like the stealthy warrior, whatever it is, it's got to be balanced with this like celebration of beauty. And the team really does a good job at that balance. So some people spend a bunch of their time in Atsu's head and what's going through her, and they've got to live in that place for a really long time, and then they're the most joyful people you've ever met. I don't know how they do it. Like, it's shocking. Ian is actually one of those people. And then you have people who just like work on beautiful trees and flowers flowing, and like, they're just making the art direction of the backdrop of the world come alive. So I do think that in the actual game that we've made, there's inherently a lot of balance, because it is a very real, very serious topic. And if we went too far in that way, it would probably feel too heavy. And we like the balance. We think that it's like a nice freshness to the pacing of the story. If you try to take a break from it, that's good.
Yeah. It definitely does counterbalance it. Like for as much killing there's I think just as much opportunities to like really see like serene landscapes and just envelop yourself in the nature of it. And also there's the mechanical side of it as well, right? With like the hot springs and playing music and playing the little flicking game. All of that, I think I don't usually do a lot of side quests and stuff, but I found myself doing it way more in the Ghost games, because it feels like a good kind of reflective opportunity. I try not to use fast travel as well, because after doing like a camp or a boss fight, I usually ride back to where I need to go to, because it's a good opportunity to really think about what happened, what you did there, and kind of like the narrative implications of it going forward. So I definitely think that you guys strike a pretty great balance between that. Awesome. Well, thank you so much for your time. I really appreciate it. And thank you for the game. It was very, very fun.
Thank you.
But yeah, I hope that you guys are proud of it, and hopefully we get some more Ghosts in the future. Maybe, maybe, who knows?
Well, we just got this one done.
Take a rest for a bit. Yeah.
We got Legends. We got that.
Yeah. That's a good point. Well, Jason, Ian, thank you so much for your time.
Absolutely. Thank you.
And I'm sure people will be letting you know how they feel about the story very soon.
Yeah, appreciate it. Thank you for the great questions. Really fun to talk.
Thank you.